Hey everybody, Professor Hill here. Today we're going to talk about marketing channels. So what is a marketing channel? Well, it's the path or the process that our brand takes to get to the end user. We've already talked about this when we talked about the supply chain. It's the downstream portion. It's from our initiation or what we do to the product to transform it, then as it travels from us to finally getting to the end user. And before we talk more about channels specifically, I just thought we'd look at a little bit about the retailers in our country pre-COVID-19. Here are the top 10 retailers in the US based on 2018 retail sales, billions of dollars. The 2019 list, or the ratings based upon 2019 sales, is no different. So we see Walmart, no surprise, number one. Amazon, purely e-commerce, number two, at $120 billion. A pretty big difference between Walmart and Amazon. Kroger, food chain, 120 billion. Costco, which has been growing nationally, 100 billion. And then we have the largest pharmacy type of chain, Walgreens, then the Home Depot. You can read CVS, Target, Lowe's, and Albertsons, which is a West Coast grocery chain and some other types of retail operations. So those are the top ones in the US. Who are the fastest growing retailers in 2018? Not necessarily the biggest, but fastest growing. Well, number one was Gaia, subscription service based around yoga, meditation, alternative healing. Number two is Wayfair, almost $7 billion. These are the home goods of the internet. Etsy, right? Collection that sells crafts and other things by independent makers. $600 million, up to almost 37%. Amazon in at number four, $230 billion or more. And I'm sure right now with COVID-19, their sales are up even more and their growth rate's up even more. Lululemon at number five, out of British Columbia, Canada. Started off in selling performance gear for women, for yoga, Pilates, and have now expanded and is giving Under Armour some trouble. Floor and Decor, never heard of them before, based out of Atlanta, but $1.7 billion in flooring. Coty, makeup, CoverGirl, Max Factor, sorry, Clairol, doing a really good job, almost $10 billion in sales. Duluth Trading Company, 55 stores, over $500 million. They've done very well on the internet with ads that are aimed at older, bigger men whose undergarments and other things are uncomfortable, high quality clothing for kind of like Carhartt and things like that, and have had a huge success online. Callaway Golf, somewhat surprising because golf is down as a sport, but they've done a good job expanding to, 1.25 or so, quarter of $1 billion. And I think a lot of their expansion is not only in the equipment, but also in their clothing. And their clothing's becoming more mainstream as people wear more and more athletic brands as fashion brands. And number 10, Sherwin-Williams Paint Company, 17% growth in this tough retail environment is really quite good. $17 billion worth of paint and paint products and wallpaper. And that's the top 10. Top e-commerce retailers, well, no surprise with Amazon at number one with 47% of the sales. 47 cents out of every dollar goes through Amazon, whether it's to them themselves or through their marketplace. eBay, number 2. Walmart, 4.6. Got a long way to go before they challenge Amazon, but we saw before they're almost 3 times larger. Apple at number 4. Home Depot, Costco, Wayfair. I'm not sure what the Qurate group is, Best Buy, and Macy's. So they're the top online stores. So Macy's has made a pretty decent recovery, right? At least by this. They're struggling at the brick and mortar level because not many people are going to malls, but they're doing a better job online. So, as we said before, marketing channels are the steps or processes a product goes downstream from us. And typically, when we're talking about marketing, in this case, we're the manufacturer. And so we refer to those steps, as levels. And here are some examples of typical marketing channels. So these aren't any hard and fast structures or rules that companies have to use. So we'll start with the consumer marketing channels on the left. So a zero level or a direct channel in where the product is sold directly by the manufacturer, controlled either through their store, to the consumer. Tesla leases and sells their cars directly. Cutco uses college students they hire in the summer to sell their products directly to consumers. Apple will sell you something online from their online store or their on-ground store, right? Polo has its own designer stores. And then you start to get in with intervening levels. So a one-level distribution channel or marketing channel is a manufacturer sells to a retailer, an independent company, and they sell to the consumer. So car dealerships, the car companies other than Tesla, they sell to an independent dealership that's affiliated with them. Apple also sells their products through Best Buy and Verizon and other types of retailers. And certainly you can buy a Polo or Ralph Lauren clothes at Nordstrom's or Macy's. A two-level manufacturing one means there's a wholesaler involved. So we all kind of understand what a retailer is. They sell it to the end user, in this case, a consumer. A wholesaler is another independent company who buys directly from the manufacturer in big volumes, breaks it down into smaller amounts, stores it in a warehouse or multiple warehouses, and then sells in smaller amounts to retailers because retailers aren't large enough, don't have the capacity to buy directly from the manufacturer. And many times the manufacturers prefer to sell in big volumes, right? And that they can do to wholesalers. And many times you'll find wholesalers are involved with products that are either don't cost very much, are expensive to transport or ship, that could be bulky, like paper products. So some examples of channels that use wholesalers, paper products, auto parts, candy goes to convenience stores from wholesalers, and so forth. And then you could have a third level or a three-level one, and the manufacturer sells to a wholesaler, and then the wholesaler will sell to a smaller distributor, often called a jobber, all right, whose job is to then sell in even smaller amounts to the retailer, usually smaller retailers, right? Or the jobber is selling specialized products that not many people carry, or a retailer won't carry in large amounts, and it goes to the consumer. And a lot of times, auto parts are also distributed from a wholesaler to a jobber to the retailer and then to the consumer. Industrial marketing channels are pretty similar. Some of the names change, but you can have a zero level. Matter of fact, that's the most common. Many manufacturers or service providers sell directly to the end user, the industrial customer, the business, right? That's most B2B. The main tool they use is salespeople. Many times in a one level industrial marketing channel, you'll have a distributor. They'll buy from a manufacturer and then distribute to smaller companies. That's what WB Mason does, who supplies Yeah, I see with lots of different office supplies and equipment. Many times you'll have VARs, value added retailers, who buy from a manufacturer and then add and update the offering in some way, many times working with the manufacturer, and they'll do the installation and add some other value to the product. Uh, Plumbers, electricians, they buy from a distributorship and then they install the equipment in your house or home or business. You can have another level in there, and this is where it gets a little, kind of a funky diagram. But the main thing to learn is what is a manufacturer's representative or a manufacturer's sales branch. So a manufacturer's representative is a person or a sales branch, a company, a group of people who will go out and do the sales function. They're like the sales force for the manufacturer, but they only get paid commission. They don't have to buy the product like a wholesaler or like a distributor and then resell it. So they're a broker or an agent. They don't take ownership of the product. Their job is just to bring the buyer and seller together, in this case, the industrial customer and the manufacturer. And where this is useful is one, usually smaller companies will often use manufacturers representatives who have good contacts with the target markets they're going after. So if we developed, really a spice that we thought would be good to sell to restaurants and other types of commercial kitchens, we probably aren't large enough to use or come up with or pay our own sales force to do national, but we might be able to sell our product through a manufacturer's rep who visits commercial kitchens and restaurants representing not only our brand, but many other brands and types of products, whether they're spices or foods or kitchen utensils or other types of equipment. So those are some of the ways that channels are typically organized. Regardless of the channel structure, three things have to happen. The first is exchange. One of the main purposes of any marketing channel is to bring buyers and sellers together so they can consummate exchange, whether it's in a store, a physical location, a salesperson calling on a business, or it happens digitally or in a virtual world. The second function is logistical. Product has to get to the end user. Services have to get to the end user, or sometimes the end user, the buyer, has to get to where the service is going to be performed, right? But that product, could be made anywhere in the world and it has to get to the right doorstep. And the last one is this notion of facilitation, that the channel should help make it easier and smoother for buyers and sellers to perform exchange. So what happens? What do we mean by facilitation? Well, one is ease of transactions, um, buying, returning, forms of payment. Those are all ways to make it easier for buyers and sellers to consummate exchange. Many times products need other services, installation or training. Those need to be performed. Sorting, in other words, retailers or distributors have the option to choose from all the different potential manufacturers out there marketing similar products, but they can't fit all those things in their store or even on an online store and stock them. So they have to choose which ones to purchase from the suppliers. And they get that information of which ones to buy largely from the customers who come and buy things. So they help directly give feedback to the buyer, to the manufacturers of what the right assortment is. What are the right products? What do people want? So it's this kind of information to make sure that consumers are getting offered the assortment of products that they want. And then also, there's a lot of information in that channel about the customers, about competitors that gets distributed from the manufacturer all the way through to any retailers or other companies involved in the marketing channel. Just a quick definition here. So a marketing intermediary is a company that assists the manufacturer, the marketer, creating the brand through the channel in any way. I think the word intermediary comes from you have expert, you have novice, and intermediary is in between, connecting. So they might be resellers, like we just talked about, wholesalers, distributors, retails, jobbers, shipping and delivery companies, from the ones we all know about, the big companies, Uber Eats, DoorDash. Happy Returns is a company that will put their business of handling returns in different retail locations inside other stores. Banking, financing, leasing companies, and agents and brokers. And just again to say what an agent or broker is, the main difference is between a company is agents and brokers don't purchase products. They only bring buyers and sellers together. When somebody goes to sell their house, they'll get a real estate agent. And that real estate agent and the agency, they don't buy your house and resell it. They just promise to find buyers for your house and help negotiate the sale. And then they take a commission, usually about 5% on the sale. So when you think about designing your marketing channel or which channel or channels you want to use, there's several issues that you need to consider. The first one is, hey, should we do it ourselves or use marketing intermediaries? With the internet coming about, many companies are doing more and more on their own. We call that disintermediation. Literally, they're cutting out the intermediary or the middle companies that provide those services because they can do them themselves more easily. Another issue is distribution intensity. How many outlets do you need? If you're a food product or a cosmetic or beauty product, something that people purchase, uh, very often, every day, there's a lot of competitors. You might need intensive distribution. So you'll need to be at a Walmart, a Target, a Lowe's, a Home Depot, etc. At the other end, there's exclusive intensity, where there aren't very many locations or stores, but probably because your target market is really exclusive. So a company like LL Bean has relatively few retail outlets. Jared's, compared to the other stores owned by their owners, Signet Jewelers, there are relatively few of them. They're in more exclusive areas where their target market is there that can afford their prices. Designers, with their own stores, fashion stores are very exclusive. And then in between intensive and exclusive, they're selective, where you have a limited number of outlets where you don't need too much or too many retail locations, but you need more than exclusive. So an example might be IKEA or Ethan Allen, who have stores, at least three, four, five in every state or more, usually centered around the larger cities. Another consideration is how many channels do you want to have? You're not limited to one channel, especially now with the internet. So many companies use multiple channels, online, brick and mortar, different retailers for different wholesalers for different target markets. And then within that is the idea of the omni-channel. So when you have multiple channels with different companies or intermediaries you may be working with, or different situations if you're doing it yourself, customers expect all these things to be fully integrated. So it doesn't really matter whether you bought it online, you can return it in the store, or vice versa. So, click and pick up is real popular now. You have to be able to return it. So that causes, more planning if you anticipate that your customers are going to expect to be able to return or buy any of your products that you sell in any of the channels. Another issue is this idea of contact efficiency. what is the most efficient or cost-effective way for you to reach your target market? Now, before the internet, it would be relatively difficult for manufacturers to reach everybody because they would have to have many locations. So it really wasn't a big issue. And most companies use some form of retail, wholesaler, or distributor because they were more efficient and effective at reaching the target market. Now, with the internet, that isn't always true. And some companies find it easier and more efficient and more cost effective to do that part of exchange and the marketing channel themselves. Logistics play a large role in designing your marketing channel. The basic trade-off in logistics is speed of shipping or transportation versus cost. The faster, the more quickly you need something shipped to get to wherever, the more it's going to cost you. The lower the cost in shipping, the more time it takes. So with that in mind, some of the issues are geographical distance. Usually, the further you have to ship it, it makes more sense to use intermediaries. If the product is bulky and or very heavy, again, it makes more sense to ship it in short distances and let your intermediaries, such as wholesalers and retailers, share some of the cost of storing and then distributing the product to the end user. If the brands and products you're selling are relatively have low prices and low costs, such as small items, candy, nuts and bolts, small other types of products, it usually makes more sense to use intermediaries because they have lower shipping costs. And then finally, if the what you're selling or marketing is perishable, that it has an expiration date on it, whether it's food or something else, usually that means you need faster transportation. And again, you're more likely to use intermediaries. You also need to look at facilitation functions. Who can provide the proper financing and take all the different forms of payment that you may want to be able to accept from ultimately the end user? If your product needs service or installation or maintenance or training, etc., um, can you find a channel member that can perform it? Is it something that you might have to do yourself? And then another important idea is the collection of information about customers, channel members, and competitors. Um, so again, are your channel members, potential channel members, capable of doing that? Are they capable of doing it accurately or and sharing the information, or is it something that's so important that you might be better off collecting it yourself? You should also look at the decision as an investment. Is it a good return on your investment compared to other things you can do? We saw earlier that Procter and Gamble is the largest consumer packaged goods company in the US in terms of brands. They probably have enough brands where they might be successful with their own stores. Why don't they have their own stores? Because for them, they're more profitable as a manufacturer and marketer of consumer packaged goods than as running their own stores. Typical supermarket only makes 1 to 2% net profit. And even though Procter& Gamble store may not have all the costs that a supermarket has, they definitely make more money as a marketer than as a retailer. On the other hand, look at Apple. The Apple stores are doing great. They're in the top 10 as a retailer. And they're the only really electronics manufacturer and marketer that sells, their products at a retail location. Samsung, Dell, Lenovo, uh, LG, they don't have their own stores. Why does it work for Apple? Well, first of all, their products are highly profitable. Two, they have a huge customer base. Their products are complicated, so they can provide help and further engage their customers. They also then can take their products for service there, and that provides another revenue stream for them. And then while people are there getting their products serviced or looked at, they can then also look at new products. So it gives them a way to introduce new products to people, get it in their hands so they can try it out. So for Apple, it's been great because they're so large and their products are so profitable, but it really hasn't worked for any other electronics manufacturers. Have you ever been to a Microsoft store? And probably the most important aspect of your marketing channel is, can you use it, design it in a way to establish a competitive advantage? So Dell, in their marketing channel, they do all their work themselves. Most of it, they don't sell as nearly as many products in retail locations because they'll take orders and do mass customization by themselves. We talked a bit before about Apple stores. They're able to maximize their profits, keep people in their ecosystem. So not only do they have an iPhone, they have an iPad, an Apple TV, an Apple smartwatch, and their people are less likely to switch to Android or some other company. Aflac, quack, quack, the duck, they use independent contractors to sell their insurance packages to independent businesses. So if you sell Aflac, you don't have any company benefits. They pay you really well if you sell, but if you don't sell, they don't waste any money. They're not spending money on salespeople who are getting benefits but not producing. So it maximizes their dollars in terms of distribution. Amway, Avon, Herbalife, a lot of these companies use multi-level marketing. It's kind of like Aflac in the sense that they have people who sell the products directly for them. They only pay, you know, money to people who actually sell the products. So nobody's collecting any type of salary or any other benefits. Tesla can make more profit and or make their cars at a lower price because they don't have to sell to a dealership. They cut them out. They're disintermediation. They sell directly to the consumer. So do online mattress firms, Casper, Purple, there's a whole bunch of them now. Buying a mattress is expensive and not a lot of fun, so now they sell and return directly to customers. So customers can return their stuff right back, they'll take it. McDonald's and other franchisors use franchises, which we'll talk about more later, but it helps them build intensive distribution quickly because they don't have to bear all the costs of opening up new stores. And then once they have enough stores, then they can buy back the franchises when they're available and work on their profitability. Amazon has increased its attractiveness to buyers because now you can return products with it without a box or a label at all the Kohl's stores. That would be the one downside to buying at Amazon before was, returning it could be a pain. Now they've done, a really good job of removing that pain to help give them a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Now we're going to look at what flows, up and down through a channel. All right, so we can look at the product flow. So, regardless of how many different levels there are in a marketing channel, and this is an example here of a supermarket and a consumer good product, product flows all the way from the manufacturer to the retailer, ultimately to the end user. And many times product flows in the other direction, returns, defective products, damaged products. And there are some products that people trade in their old ones so the old ones can get refurbished or remanufactured and sold again. Now let's look at the ownership flow. So ownership flow means who legally owns the products. Um, so typically, a manufacturer sells to a wholesaler who buys the product. And then the wholesaler sells it to the retailer who buys the product. And when you buy the product, you own it, and so you're responsible for keeping it in good shape. If it gets damaged, it's your fault. You're the one who loses the money. Sometimes products are sold on consignment. All right, so you probably heard of consignment stores. Consignment stores are very popular nowadays for clothing and furniture, and that's when people take their used clothes or furniture to a consignment store. The consignment store is like an agent or broker. They don't buy the product, they just put it out for sale, and when it gets sold, the store and the owner split the profit in some agreed way. But if you have things in consignment and the store catches on fire or they're robbed, there's a theft, and you lose your goods, who's responsible for that? Whose insurance is supposed to cover that? So it can lead to some confusion. Certainly, there's information that needs to move up and down this channel from manufacturer through transportation. This is all really a big part of the supply chain and trying to get products to the right places in a timely manner in the right amount. So again, information and not only about where the product is and when it's going to get delivered and shipments, but also about what's happening with competitors and so forth. And then there's money, and we're going to call this here promotion in this diagram, but for me, it's really money. Money flows in both directions. Not only is there promotional money from the manufacturer being, paid through to different parties in there to help promote the product to the end user or to the distributor or the wholesaler, because they're actually purchasing it, and the ones purchasing and paying for it. There's also money flowing back in terms of payment. So when a manufacturer sells to the wholesaler, they want to get paid too, and they want to get paid in a timely manner. And many times that doesn't happen. So the point is, in this, type of channel where there's all these things going on at the same time in different directions, all right, channels are really messy, all right, they're dynamic. There's a lot going on. So if you've ever worked in the back room in a big store, you'll know what it's like. It's you have employees who don't get paid a lot, who aren't the decision makers. They have to figure out where stuff goes and whether something can be sold and what happens to it and does it get shipped back or not. And so it gets really confusing and messy, despite all the technology we have nowadays. And so then that often leads to conflict between different members of a channel, especially when everybody's independent. All right. And we can think about conflict in two different ways. There's vertical conflict. So that is between different levels within a channel, but it might be the manufacturer and the wholesaler. The manufacturer might, want the wholesaler to buy a new product line from them because they need to expand their sales. All right. So they're going to make some new products. The wholesaler might say, look, I don't want your new products. As a matter of fact, your old products aren't selling well, so I'd like you to take more of them back. And so they can fight about that, and maybe they're negotiating about it, but many times it gets very heated. And then horizontal conflict um, can happen when a manufacturer sells to a group of different retailers, and sometimes they'll agree to have exclusive territories, so they're not overlapping, and one retailer doesn't respect that. So now they're poaching in somebody else's territory, and that's an issue. With Amazon, we use the reviews to judge the quality of the products for many of our brands that we've never heard of. And it's pretty commonplace for Amazon Marketplace companies to write bad reviews about their competitors. So that would be an example of horizontal conflict that Amazon, as kind of the controlling entity there, has to be able to deal with to keep, this kind of review warfare from completely wrecking their marketplace. So where ultimately the customers can't trust any of the reviews that are there. As a matter of fact, you see there are several websites, um, Review Meta and FakeSpot, which will look at the reviews on an Amazon product and tell you whether or not they think, yeah, they're fake. They've been manufactured. What's the main source of conflict? There are a bunch of them, but the main one comes down to goal incompatibility. That many times independent companies and organizations, they have their own goals. They have to do certain things, right? They may have pressure on them to earn a certain amount of profits or to have a certain amount of sales or to, take the money they would normally spend and doing their distribution, whatever they're doing as a marketing intermediary, and spend it somewhere else. And the quality of their job as a marketing intermediary goes down. So usually it's goal incompatibility. So what's the best way to handle conflict? Get everybody to buy in to a superordinate, an overarching goal that provides everyone with enough mutual benefit so that they're willing to cooperate and compromise to get a piece of the profit. Now, that's not always easy to do because oftentimes companies are pursuing, their own goals that they have. And so they just can't accept that. So as nice as that sounds, it doesn't always work. But if you can arrange that, it works very well. But you also have to be willing to set up some type of system so that members in your marketing channel and also your supply chain have a way to work out differences and conflict. There are 5 sources of power. They come from sociology. They're used a lot in business, but they're also used in everyday life. So try to remember back to when you were young and your parents wanted you to eat something you didn't like. How would they get you to do that? So for me, it was Brussels sprouts. I didn't like Brussels sprouts when I was a kid. I probably still don't like Brussels sprouts. How do my parents get me to eat it? They'd say, hey, Clay, here, we'll give you an extra scoop of ice cream if you eat your Brussels sprouts. They give me a reward, right? They provide an incentive for me to do what they wanted. So it's used a lot in business, right? The manufacturer who's trying to get the wholesaler to buy a new type of product by giving them an additional price discount and other types of benefits if they take on the new product. If you use incentives a lot, you have to be careful because the incentive can become an expectation. Imagine all of a sudden that the airlines or a particular airline like United stopped offering frequent flyer miles. Many business travelers who do the bulk of traveling, who get to use the miles they accumulate, would switch from United to another airline. So now frequent flyer miles really has become an expectation and an additional cost for the airlines that results in higher prices and increased fees. What's another way my parents would get me to eat those Brussels sprouts? They might tell me that if I don't eat them, I don't get any dessert. So we call that coercion, threatening, punishment. All right. And yeah, it's very effective in the short term. Maybe you've had a teacher, a parent, a coach that uses that. If you don't do what I say or you don't work harder, you're not going to get what you want. All right. Um, for example, a retailer might threaten not to buy from the wholesaler unless they lower their prices by 10%. Right? That's a threat. But if you use threats all the time, even if you follow through on them, right, what happens? Okay, that if you browbeat businesses because they're composed of people, right, they'll get resentful, right, and they'll do something just to get even though it hurts them. I'm sure you've been in a situation where you have somebody who's always threatening, using the threat of punishment to get you to do what they want, and after a while, you'll do something on purpose that will get you punished just to show them up, just because you're so resentful. So what happens in business? Your partners, the people, the companies in your marketing channel, they leave. right? They don't stick around. And then when you can, if a situation arises when you can no longer use coercion, you have nothing to threaten them with, all right? They're not going to cooperate, right? They're going to probably look to hurt you back. So you can use it. You have to, be judicious, careful on how you use it. Don't use it too much because then nobody will want to work with you. Now, my parents did get me to eat spinach, so I still eat spinach to this day. How did they get me to eat it? Well, they told me that spinach would make me strong like Popeye. In the fall, all right, starting probably around November and December, parents can often get their kids to do whatever they want because they tell them that if they're naughty, Santa Claus isn't going to come and leave them any gifts. So, what's their form of power? It's expertise. That as a child, we believe our parents really know, that they're the experts. So, knowledge or information, having access to it or experience is often a source of power. And you'll be able to get other companies to follow your lead because of your expertise. And a classic example of this is that before optical scanners in grocery stores and any types of stores, and that's the only type of scanner or checkout system that you guys pretty much have grown up with, people use cash registers, no electronics. And even though a cash register could track a few kind of types of things that was being sold, a supermarket, for example, really had no idea what was selling well. The only way they could really find out what was on the shelves is to do inventory. And they can't do that every day. They could do that maybe once a week or twice a month for their ordering, but they didn't really know what was really selling. And they had no really good idea of what was selling in their other stores and other locations or even with competitors. So that meant that marketers such as Procter and Gamble and General Foods, they had a lot more information because they visited all these different stores. Their salespeople did. So they had a good idea of what was selling well in the marketplace overall, and they had a lot of pull. It was pretty easy to get new products into the grocery store or supermarket because everybody was looking to optimize their sales. Once optical scanners came along and barcodes, all of a sudden this got switched, right? 180 degrees. Retailers knew exactly what was selling in their stores. They knew what size, how much, whether it was a coupon, how many, to what customers. And all of a sudden now the retailers knew not only what their one store was selling or a store, they knew what all their stores were selling. And then a couple of companies gathered this information, bought it from a lot of the different supermarkets. So now everybody knew exactly what was selling. And the marketers had less power because they didn't have the expertise. Retailers knew exactly how much money they were generating for each space on the shelf. And they were able to negotiate much better deals when retailers wanted them to put on new products. They were able to negotiate what people call slotting fees. And so the retailer would tell them, look, we'll try your new product, but we're taking something on off the shelf that's already making X amount of dollars for us. We're taking a risk, and then we have to get rid of the stuff in inventory and take it out of our computer system. So that's going to cost us a bunch of money. So we want $20,000 from you. And they got it. And so there was this big tug of war between retailers and marketers in terms of grocery stores and supermarkets, and they've gotten better at negotiating and everything. So there isn't as much conflict, but the switch in power was based upon expertise. Now, my wife and my oldest son used to fight a lot about his messy room, and she would ask him to pick up, and being a rebellious teen, he would say like, "Why should I? It's a free country, and who's going to make me?" And ultimately, my wife's argument for why he should pick up would be, because I'm your mother and I told you so. So what kind of power is that? All right. That's called legitimate power. And that's where one party, one person is seen as having, a fair claim that they should be the leader because they're the teacher, they're the parent, they're the coach. Ultimately, legitimate power comes from culture, whatever the arrangement is. In business, most legitimate power comes from laws, regulations, and contracts. So that if a company breaks the law, they can be sued for damages. The government can, seek to change their behavior. They won't allow companies to merge together. So, for example, at one point, Dunkin' Donuts canceled some of its franchises because the local owner did not keep the store up to standards. It wasn't 60 Minutes, it was Dateline went in there, and it was disgusting how unclean and unsanitary their different locations were. So, Dunkin' Donuts, because they had a contract with the owner of the franchise, was able to cancel that person's franchises and close them down. The last source of power is a little hard to do with the little kid and the parents and eating the food, so I'm just going to show it to you. It's called referent power. I like to use the term affiliation, and that's the idea when um, one person wants to be affiliated, wants to be referenced with another group. Um, And so in doing so, they're willing to do whatever they have to do to get that affiliation. So this is really the power that comes with hazing. That's one way to think about it. So people are willing to go through hazing because they want to join the group. They're not forced to do it. They can walk away, but they're willing to do it because joining the group is so important to them. So this type of power in business ultimately comes from being able to provide the most value. Companies want to work with the Apples and the Amazons and the Samsungs and the high value companies because it's going to help them get them more business. So for example, if you wanted to be an official repair facility for Apple or Samsung, right? They might say to you, that's fine, but you have to buy, thousands of dollars of purchase replacement parts. You have to pay for training, and you have to kick back to us a certain amount of your sales and profits. If you want to do that, we'll be happy to have you as a partner. But if you don't want to do that, we're not going to do it. So Apple and Samsung, in the case, they're not forcing other companies to do this. They don't have the other companies don't have to do it. They only have to do it whether they're willing. But when you have a lot of referent or affiliation power, other companies will want to work with you, even though the deal they're getting may not seem fair. It's enough to benefit them. So the more value you have as a company and your brands have, the more referent power you're going to have. Now, because channels filled with independent companies often experience a lot of conflict, regardless of power, regardless of trying to set an overarching goal. Marketers have developed what they call vertical marketing systems. And the idea is to use power to create, a unified marketing channel such that everybody acts in everybody's best interest. It's a way to try to maximize cooperation through the use of power and having, you know, mutual benefits for members. And there are three types of vertical marketing systems. The first one is corporate, all right? And that's if like, hey, I don't really like, working with other companies, or they're not as good as we are, or we can do it better. Just do everything yourself, all right? Control everything, all right? Gap has their own brand and their own stores. They do their own manufacturing and they have their own stores. All right. Apple does almost everything themselves and they have a very strong corporate marketing channel. Many web-based businesses, they do everything themselves. Yeah, they'll use marketing intermediaries to help deliver products, but in terms of having a distributor or a retailer or a wholesaler, they don't. What's the benefit? Well, typically everybody should be on the same page because you're all part of the same company, and the company should be able to work out any disagreements. Um, the risk in doing corporate vertical marketing system is that now you have all your eggs in one basket. So, for example, Radio Shack was run by the Tandy Company, who manufactured not all the products in the Radio Shack, but most of the smaller electronics and repair things. And then when they struggled, it brought down the whole company. So if the market you're in struggles, you're stuck with retailers, a retail system not doing well, a wholesale system not doing well, and as a manufacturer, you're not doing well. So it's difficult. So it's risky. Another form is called administered, and that's when you have a clear, channel captain. You have one company that has most of the power, and often this can be created by working with smaller or weaker companies. So big strong companies can design their channels this way. Walmart's a good example. Walmart's the leading retailer in the world. What's the value they offer? They have thousands of millions of customers walking through their stores every day looking to buy a whole wide gamut of different products. Um, Walmart, has really low prices. They're really efficient in what they do, but also they're able to command low prices from many of their suppliers, many of the companies that are supplying the products to them. Why? Because they're so powerful. And they often choose to work with less known brands because they'll have even more power. Because once you're selling at Walmart, um, if you lose them as your customer, how do you replace them? You can't replace those sales. And even though you'll see some good brands at Walmart, they often don't sell their top of the line brands there because they would then have to undercut all their other retailers that they use. So Walmart's good at working with weaker companies that are more likely to agree to whatever conditions they enforce. And so when Walmart says jump, people don't ask why, they just say how high. The last type of vertical marketing system is contractual. And that's where all the channel members are bound by contracts. So if somebody doesn't meet their obligations, the other companies can sue to seek any damages or remedies. There's three types. So we're going to quickly go over those. So franchises is the most common, and almost 50% of all new businesses are franchises. Don't forget, most new businesses are small businesses. And a franchise is just an agreement between two parties on how to run a business. And most of the ones that we're very familiar with, like McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Planet Fitness, they have relatively elaborate contracts. For example, for McDonald's, they control how your building looks, the colors you use, the design. Um, you have to pay to have your employees go to McDonald's school. You have to buy your paper, your product, your food, everything from whoever they tell you to. All right, the menu and the pricing they control. Uh, you have to kick back to them a part of your sales and your profits. In exchange, they'll also do product development for you and national and local advertising. Why do people agree to that? Because McDonald's is pretty much a turnkey operation. They give you the keys, you put the key in the lock, open the door, and you have an up and running business. On the other hand, a franchise can be simply just an agreement to show your brand name in a store. We could probably buy a franchise on eBay for very little money. They're not going to do much for us, and we're not going to have to do much, but we'll have some type of agreement. Now, why would a company like McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts, why would they use franchises? So imagine you're Ray Kroc, who is the owner of McDonald's, and you have a very successful restaurant. Maybe you have two of them, and you think, hey, I would like to expand. So the problem with expanding and owning all those stores is it takes a lot of capital. It takes a lot of money because you have to buy the land, you have to build the building, you have to hire the people, train them, get everybody up and going. pay back the bank, and then build the next one. Yeah, the more successful you get, the more you can open at the same time, but it's a very time intensive way to go about things. And then as your competitors or future competitors see the success they're having, they're going to have the opportunity to open up their own fast food restaurants, because McDonald's is really the first national one. So then Burger Kings and Wendy's and In-N-Outs and all those other ones are going to come up, and you're not going to be able to expand fast enough. And remember, the top three things in retail are location, location, location. So franchising lets companies expand faster, right? They don't have to put up the cash or the money or borrow the money to open up many different outlets. So they can expand quickly into the prime locations. And if they open up 100 franchises and five of them fail, right, it's not their money. It's the individual investor who's out the money. Now, do they make as much profit? No, they don't make as much profit because they only get a portion of the sales and a portion of the profit. But what McDonald's has done, and many other franchises do, once they've expanded fully, or they're looking to increase their profitability and they don't see much of an ability to expand the number of restaurants or locations, they'll start buying back their franchises. So instead of being a franchise, whenever they can, whenever a franchisee puts up one for sale or a group of them for sale, they'll buy it and run it as a company store and capture all the profits. But that's one reason why companies will choose to do franchises. A retail cooperative and a voluntary chain store, the next two are kind of the same idea, just it matters who's the company doing the organizing. So a retail cooperative or a co-op is when independent retailers get together and decide, you know what, we might share a brand name, but we're all independently owned. We're not part of a bigger company, but we're going to work together, okay, and do our own wholesaling. So we'll buy together as a group. So Ace Hardware and let's say they have 1,000 hardware stores across the country. Instead of buying on their own, they'll pool all their sales together on a lot of their main product lines. And now they can buy, at least fairly comparably to a Home Depot or a Lowe's or a Walmart. So they're not as big a price disadvantage. So retailers get together and say, hey, let's act as one big company, and then we'll go out and purchase. Now, voluntary chain store is the same idea, except it's the wholesaler, the independent wholesaler who looks at their independent customers, and many times, they're struggling because think about farm health and beauty products and independent pharmacies. I mean, if I was to ask you where do you buy your soap, shampoo, deodorant, other products like that, most people say a grocery store, Walmart, Target, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid. They're all national chain stores, right? Who have, many of those, the ones I just named are in the top 10 or top 20 retailers in the country. They have great buying power. They can, get great prices because they buy in such volume. So the independent pharmacies really struggle because they can't buy like that. So on the products that people are really familiar with the prices, their prices are high because they can't buy low enough. So a voluntary chain store takes independent stores. The wholesaler gets together and look, if you give me all your health and beauty aid sales, you give me all your cough medicine sales and pain medicine sales, I'll get a better price because I can order in bigger bulk and I'll share some of the savings with you to give you lower prices. So IGA supermarkets is like that. So, but the idea of it is the same. Retail cooperative and voluntary chain stores, independent companies work together, to buy better by buying as one company, even though officially they're not the same company, and then they can go on their own way.